You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Brian Kelly's not going to name a starter. I'm curious your thought. Daniels, Nussmeier, what about the decision not to name a starter? Does it really provide a tactical advantage?
Well, the similarities between the two, now Jaden's played a lot more football. Nussmeier, they both can add a sense of mobility. And we saw Arizona State, what Jaden Daniels did, and, the interceptions to touchdowns a little more difficult last year, but is rushing the football. We know Nussmeier has that. Both of them, can throw the football, and, the experience obviously favors Daniels. So I don't know when it's a tactical advantage. I guess if you're Florida State, you're saying, well, we get the young guy, and would we use more pressure situations on him? Because I know, when working with young guys, the key of staying sound with your feet and your mechanics and making sure your eyes get through progressions, because you're talking the SEC and you're talking a lot of football. Now, he's got great football in his blood, good DNA, because his pops is a pretty good teacher of it and was a good player too, and he's been coaching a while. So that's that football coach's mentality for Nuss. So I don't know if it's a major tactical advantage, unless, of course, Brian Kelly feels like, okay, I always say this, put yourself on the other side. If you were defending the guy that you're coaching, how would you then what would be the tactical advantage? And when he announced his decision, I thought, okay, does Brian, when he looks at them, is there a blatant difference between the two that he would assume Florida State's defensive staff looks at like he would? So if that's the case, you say, okay, veteran, been around, played a lot of football, and get you in and out of the huddle, not going to get flustered, because Jaden Daniels is a very poised young man, been starting since he was a freshman. And then you look at the other side and say, okay, well, we got a guy who's got good football IQ, and he's still learning the position. So I guess the tactical part comes into, you could probably get a little bit more creative or throw caution to the wind if you're Florida State's defense. They ran the football well last week, so control the ball and understand that maybe you could confuse a little more. But this is a smart kid in Nussmeier as well as Jaden Daniels. So, but if Brian feels it, then he's looking at it from the defensive side, saying, okay, if it was me, would I think it was tactical to know? So if Brian likes, now Brian, as you know, he's a organized, step-by-step, point-by-point guy. He's hard on quarterbacks. He expects them to play smart. So here's what my gut tells me, that if you're Jaden Daniels or Garrett Nussmeier, you have pretty good idea who's starting, I would think. Now, I'll tell you this. I think they're both going to play. I think you're going to see them both, and maybe in the first and second game, kind of like what Michigan's doing. Yeah. And I hate two quarterback systems. Michigan executed it well, and I get it. That's one that I step aside because you got two studs. As you're learning here, I usually like to go with one, because normally if you have two, you don't have one, because one hasn't established himself. In Michigan, they both have, but here, not with a transfer and a new system, and both of them in a new system because it's a new coach, so they're trying to learn. So Brian's probably trying to figure out who gets me in and out of the huddle, who's got a clear picture of what's going on, and who gives me the best chance to get up, get things going, and get rolling. And after a couple games, we see them both. Then we can jump in and say, okay, I think Game 3 isn't at home against Mississippi State, Matty. I think they're at home, and Mississippi State can be dangerous, right? Florida State's good. Don't misunderstand me. My gut tells me you're going to play the guy that gives you more veteran leadership right now, and they got more experience, and Brian loves that. So, but then he also likes playmakers. So my gut would say Jaden's going to start, Nussmeier's going to play, and the second game same way, which should be a bit easier. And then you get prepared for a Mike Leach team, which we've talked about last year, and it came to fruition that Mike will do some crazy stuff. So it's a danger game, but you can't look ahead of that because Florida State and them is pretty evenly matched ball game this weekend. So I think it's going to be Jaden, but the tactical advantage is, I would imagine you're not going to wake up on Saturday morning and let the guy know during pregame warm-up that he's starting, because I think that while that may be a tactical advantage for you, I also think it becomes a disadvantage for the quarterback not getting into his starting pitching routine and going through whatever he'd go through on his game day. But Brian Kelly, if you protect the ball and make smart decisions, you got a real good chance to play for him.
Hey, Sean, have you worked with Jaden Daniels or Nussmeier in the past?
I have not. I have not coached either one of them. Now, throughout my times in Scottsdale, of people that have watched and seen and out there, and And I've watched a lot of Jaden Daniels because of Pac-12 guys.
Right.
I've seen Garrett here a couple times, but I have not seen much of him. But I know his dad well enough and watched his dad play plenty. So he usually doesn't fall far from the tree, and usually the younger ones are better athletes than we are. So because they've learned well, so they watch Dad grow up doing it and watching tape. So I know they both put a lot of work in the offseason, especially Jaden Daniels and his footwork, to get himself in position where the mechanics don't break down under pressure.
Now, I know you'd worked with a lot of quarterbacks in Arizona, which is why I thought there might have been a tie with Jaden. I should have asked you that beforehand. Right. But
no, it's okay.
You did see him at Arizona State plenty, of
a lot.
Course. So if there's a knock and there's this sort of narrative here, it's, well, he's inaccurate. Do you see that? Like, is that a fair criticism of Jaden Daniels?
He's never going to lead the country in accuracy, passing efficiency. I mean, I guess saying never is not fair, Matty. I mean, he could step it up. I think the thing is, and what happens with guys that can do a lot of things. I remember when he busted onto the scene as a freshman in the Pac-12. People were like, I talked to Herm Edwards about him too. He said, Sean, this guy's a really dynamic talent, and was talking about it. And I think early on he completed like right around 60. Well, that's the old school 55%, right, man? When you used to complete 55, 56%, you're a pretty good player back in the 80s and 90s. And then it's got to the point, we can't live at 60, you throw it too much. Now, then I think his final year, while the interceptions to touchdown were pretty even, if I'm not mistaken,
it was 10 and 10.
His percentage went up. I think he was 64, 65%. Yep. So we saw, and 5 percentage points to me, Matty, is a quantum leap. Now, you don't see that. Now, the question is, out here, they're going to play tougher defense than they did in the Pac-12. That's just a fact of the matter. They are going to be physical. They're going to create new lines of scrimmage. And now the Pac-12 is good football, but you're dealing with can be nuts. Now you're practicing against some good players up front too. So I think what happens, and I think that's why you put the footwork in. Matt, spend a lot of time where your eyes and feet are moving at the same time, and you're getting through them. Because what happens with talented guys, and it's normal, is you rely on your ability like we all do. What's the best thing you do? Oh, let me rely back on that instead of thousands of times repeating it. So maybe this offseason take another level where the second guy's not there and make the play. And I know both of these guys have to do a better job of making sure you don't play hero football. It's a tendency. Young guys they're trying to bust on the scene, Nussmeier. Now you're trying to impress a new coach. You don't have to. Make the simple play. I say it all the time. And players get in trouble trying to be heroes. In the process of making the simple play, the big play will come. Jaden, we've seen more of that. I watched him make some spectacular football plays. So I'm not going to say he's in it. 65% is not inaccurate. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, what is 65% starting every down on an offensive line that they got to prove us something? Yeah. Does he in his mind think, oh, my gosh, I'm going to have to bail myself out with my feet, or does he go back to pocket presence and standing in there and letting his eyes and feet move at the same speed and get through progressions and then use your feet as a check down? So we'll have a better, Matty, when we talk about this in the middle of the season, we'll get a better idea if the mechanics are breaking down. If they're solid and he's in that 63 to 66 range with his playmaking ability, it's like the guy who hits home runs. I don't need Aaron Judge to hit 340, 280, and I can live with 280 and all those home runs. It's the same thing here. I can live with 64, 65% as long as he's making the simple play, and I get those extra big plays with him or Garrett, whoever it is, with their ability to extend plays and make throws. But it's important you don't try to be a hero, and most of us have tried that at times, and it usually gets you in trouble.
Sean, before you go, I want to ask you sort of a big picture Brian Kelly question, which is, and I'll leave it open-ended for you to answer however you want. How and how much better does Brian Kelly make LSU right now?
More disciplined. Accountability. Now, this is no knock on the previous regime. Right? I don't mean. I mean, we saw what they had when they had players, and good coach, and they had good coaching staff. They did, and it got away from them the last couple of years. I understand, and they had a guy at quarterback who's going to win an MVP in the league, and a couple wide receivers are pretty good. So They were loaded, man. And defense. I mean, we got one of your guys sitting here at corner and with the Texans, so it's pretty good. I would say it's going to be different. It's going to be a little more buttoned up. It's going to be you're going to see him now. Ed coached hard too. The quarterback. It reminds me of the Mike Martz, and you know Mike from all his years.
Sure.
Mike and I talked to Warner about it, to Mark Bolger in the past about it, to Trent Green. All of them who had Martz. You better put it this way: there's no defense that's going to test your skin more than the quarterback than the coach. and that was with Mike. And once you got through practice, the games were easy. And I mean this as a compliment to Brian, but you're going to see accountability. It's not just going to be the getting on him. It's going to be the everyday buttoned-up routine of doing it this way, and he's going to coach you hard. So I don't know record. I mean, they'll be better this year. I don't know if that means 9 or 10 wins. I think we're a bit of that away and getting more of his recruits and settling into this name, image, and likeness and transfer portal. But I can tell you this, they won't beat themselves very often. They may have – somebody may run into better players, but they're not going to beat themselves very often. And that defense will keep them in games. Just protect the football and you'll have it. But you're going to see it's 180 degrees different from the approach that you're going to see from both coaches, at least the last year for Coach O and the first year for this. Both had ways of doing it, but Brian Kelly, the leash isn't very long with him if you're putting your team in a bind, and that doesn't matter what position you're at. He doesn't expect you. Mental mistakes will get you just in just as bad a trouble as physical mistakes will.
He's on Twitter at Sean Unfiltered. Y'all give him a follow. Man, I know I said it. I'll say it again. I'm so fired up to have you back for another football season with us, man. Thanks for making yourself available to us and our audience all throughout the year. We're looking forward to it, man. We'll talk next week.
My favorite times of the week, brother. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.